Hello everyone, this is Ian. In this video, I'm going to make the building model that I posted in Twitter and Instagram. That simple building model with the cute lights. So the purpose of it was to let you create a simple asset for you to reuse in your scene. Now, I know there are a lot of add-ons that lets you use not add-ons, a lot of uh, purchasable assets that uh, comes with pre-built models, but you can only use it as far as you can before your work starts looking like somebody else's, because you're essentially using the same model. So with this tool, at least you can create some variation when you want. Okay, so this is our building. I kind of angled it a bit. So remember the documentation that uh, the result of the randomization relies greatly on the topology, especially in its configuration, on how it looks. So we need some topology to create some interest in the randomization result, but we don't need too much of it, because too much faces equals a lag in the randomization process. So this is our building, the base of our building. What I'm going to do is mirror this. Okay, I'm going to mirror this in the XY axis. So X and Y axis. This UI for the auto mirror will be for the next update, and it will be uploaded soon enough. I'm just going to mess around with the pre-built geometries for the panel screws and flanges and couplings to make them much suited for normal baking, to bevel some of the parts that I had it beveled. Okay, so this is our geometry now. So what we're going to use here is loop extrude and random panels. Mostly random loop extrude. If we have an opportunity to use random panels, we'll use it, but it will be mostly random loop extrude. So I have my presets here, but we're going to start with the fresh. So I'm going to use 3 loop objects. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, this is what's going to be the default. So 0 base subdivision and 0 loop subdivision. So I just activated loop 1, 2, and 3. So without the individual solver, without the original only toggle on, number 2 will be sourced from loop 1 object, and number 3 will be sourced from loop 2 object. And number 1 will be sourced from our source mesh, which is our base mesh here. Meaning that the faces from loop 1 object will be coming from the source object. Loop 2 object will be coming from the loop 1 object, and loop 3 object will be coming from the loop 2 object. So they're kind of stuck together. You can see that if we disable 1 and 2, you can see that loop 3 is kind of hanging in the air because it's coming from the loop 2 object, and loop 2 object is coming from the loop 1 object. If we however toggle on original only, then all loop objects will be coming from the source mesh. So as you can see, if I wait, let's increase the subdivision. If I mess around with the randomization of loop 1 object, it won't affect 40. You can see that it won't affect the loop 2 object. So this is our loop 2 object. Okay, remember the pattern here. So you can see that because loop 2 object is no longer associated with loop 1 object. So each loop object is now sourced from the source mesh. So that's what we are going to use. Let's activate. We're going to use 3 loop objects, and we're going to use original only. Ignore border faces. Toggle on ignore border faces. I think maybe this is um I think this is I can't remember, but I think this is for the next update as well. And individual solver path, meaning that each loop object will have their own. You can set their own solver and path. As you can see if I toggle this on. And if we go here, you can set a solver for loop 1 object, depending on the number. 1 is sampling, 2 is recursive, and 3 is radial. And here, path, none, shortest, and longest. And it's the same for loop 2 and loop 3 object. And now we're going to set the pattern. So 80%, we're going to use 80% of the faces from the source mesh using loop 1 object, 60% from the source mesh using loop 2 object, and 60% for loop 3 object as well. Now, since they are coming from the source mesh, having the same amount of inset depth will make it look like they're overlapping. So if you use the original only, you have to set different inset depth for each loop object. So for example, 0.05 for loop 1 object, 0.04, okay, 0.06, and 0.03 for loop 3 object, 60%. Okay, subdivision. This is the subdivision of the loop objects, and this is the subdivision of the base object. Let's use number 2. So base cut of 2 and loop subdivision of per loop subdivision we're using 1. Okay, now so this is the ratio, our phase ratio. This is our randomization. Now let's see here, loop panel size. This means that the size of the islands. For example, if I use 1%, so it goes smaller, and 0%, this becomes reflects the size of the faces. Now this becomes just individual faces. So this refers to the size of the islands generated. So 10%, 50, and this is very sensitive. So that's why you see in my videos that I usually just go from 5 to 20, depending on the source mesh itself. So 10% and 554. Let's just use 554. 2 and loop 2 and 3 object. Okay, angle. So remember that radial, number 3, the paths doesn't work with radial. Paths only work with sampling and recursive. So I'm just gonna use sampling for all loop objects and probably use none for loop 1, longest for loop 2 object. Okay. Now, this is also for the next update, wrap around. You can see here that it cut the angle in the 30-degree maximum threshold. If we use wrap around, the geometry, the islands will wrap around the corners instead of being cut. So this will be in the next update. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to use uh, the ones that you have now. So you can just increase it to 90 degrees. And this might create distortions for some part because this is not the same as this one, the wraparound. So just mess around with there. So just mess around with the random seed to get the much better result. So if you use wraparound and use 30, so it looks much better. But it also will cause some, depending on the geometry, it will also cause some distortion on some areas. So okay, let's reuse angle. Let's try 3 subdivision. 4. Be careful with the subdivision. So it's up to you to really feel it on the amount of faces that you're using. What I mean is that your experience with the tools on how much faces it can handle before certain subdivision makes the operation crash or freeze. So I'm trying, I think I like this subdivision level. Now we're going to get rid of this overlapping shadow. This, you will not see this in render, but I will just get rid of it. Try and get rid of it. It's 0.03. Let's see if we can see the effect of loop tree object. Yes, we can. How about making it higher than loop 1 object? Setting it to 10. Okay, number 3. Okay, this overlap here, this won't be visible in render. Okay, let's know more about it. You can avoid it for now because you don't have this option here. Let's try and use 90 degrees and try to look for distortion. So there's not so much distortion. So now that we have our setting, let's play around with the random seed. So that's number 3. So the inset also has a random seed. So instead of changing the value, you can just randomize it. 0.07. I think this is, wait. Let's try 8%. This kind of just jotting up. Okay. 0.1 indeed. 5%. So watch everything. Watch every area. Okay. I think this is good. We have a nice pattern here. Now you can save this preset or settings. Let's try it. You can name it whatever you want, but try and name it based on the settings. So for example, three loop objects and 4 base cuts. So something like that, just to let you know the subdivision, because if you select a certain amount of faces, if it's too high and you suddenly use a higher presets, a higher subdivision presets on a really high amount of face selection, then it's going to freeze. So try and name your stuff, your presets with the something about that tells something about the settings. So 3L, true loop objects for base cuts and original only, OO, something. So orig, there we go. Okay. Now we're going to create more buildings. Whoops. Shift D, our base. You can group this into a collection, or you can apply mesh and join objects to cube, or join it into a single object. Those objects are still here. So you can see vertex groups, they are still here, and you can separate them using that. And you can reestablish the mirror after that. So this just makes everything cleaner. So if you want to use it as a single a unimesh asset, then you can use the apply mesh and join objects. Okay. So for here, we're going to create a lower building. And create additional edge loops to have a variation in the to create a variation in the result of the randomization. So let's say let's do this as well. And selecting every faces, random loop extrude, three loop objects for base cuts and original only. Yeah, I think this is good. Let's try 3, 2, so 3 base cuts. We can just pull this. to avoid the overlap shadow if it's annoying you too much. Okay, cube 1, shift D, qualify that, and let's get rid of this. So how about this one? So the only thing that the script couldn't quantify, I couldn't subdivide is ingon, so it can subdivide triangles, but the result will not be as pretty as quads. So, but let's just try it. Whoa. So that is a distortion. Let's mess with the settings until it's gone. So it's still there, probably because of the cut angle. There we go. So let's just use 90 degrees because that's what you have. And let's play around with the settings until it disappears. There we go. The distortion is from the loop 3 object. So you can see it's much noisier in the triangle area. So I'm going to use recursive solver. So recursive solver handles triangles much better. Wrap around. So it's going to be much better with wrap around. But you don't have it for now. So let's just use what you have. Okay, I'm getting rid of the triangles. Yeah, I think that's cool. So we have 3 buildings. Now let's get to texturing. So this is the purpose of the random V color. It creates colors for these randomized objects, or base can quickly create base colors for these randomized objects. Instead of filling them with texture color, we can use Vertex Color to quickly fill them with color instead of, since we're not UVing, you don't need UVs to create Vertex Color, so you can skip that. You can skip the texturing part or use paint colors. So instead of, let's see, going to paint, since we don't have this UV, and we'd have to go to each of the island to fill it with colors that we want, then it's gonna take some time. So instead of using paint, we're going to use Vertex Color. Object mode, select all the mesh, and random V color. So object instead of islands. So object means it's going to color each of the separate objects. With islands, it's going to color the islands, the face islands in each of the objects. So for example, this object here, this has different islands. This has multiple islands because of the randomization. Those are the what we call the islands. And the selected, and it will only color the selected. So for example here, I select this and this. It also works for multiple objects. So only selected. So you can see that it only color the selected object. Okay. Alt H, Shift GT. So I'm going to avoid using color. So I can use color ramps for that in the shader node. So what I'm going to do instead is put the max saturation to 0. And go to object. I'm going to use hard gradient for value. So if you want to add saturation, shift click. If you hover, you can see the instruction right there. Shift click, drag to select multiple, and to remove. So just value. HG stop. So the amounts of color. So right now, this is only 2. So what it's using right now is only 0 and 1. If I use 3, it's using maximum value. It's using 0, 5, and 1. So what it's doing is dividing the minimum value here to the maximum value. So we're going to use 4 color steps between 0.6 and 0.9 color value. So this is HSV, so U saturation value. What you have right now may be color, so I change it over. I will be changing it over to U, to the term U instead of color. So HSV, HSV, and HSV. And this is the random seed. So since we're only touching the value, we're going to, this is the only thing that we're going to modify. So you can see if I use the minimum of 2, it's going to only randomize between 0.6 and 0.9. It's going to only randomize 0.6 and 0.9 and not in between. Okay. So 4 color steps. Actually, let's use this one. So if you have cuber, you can adjust let's see, Shift G, selecting a mesh, Shift G, type. So that's what I'm doing. So Shift GT, so that's why it's too quick. Okay. And to remove the overlay selection, Alt Shift Alt Z. I believe you have to go to the user preferences and enable There, extra shading by amino items. So you can see more in this if you press A. So this is toggle overlays. And this is Alt Shift Z. And this is pretty useful. So for example, if I have this in edit mode and I'm designing organic model and I'm using, for example, proportional editing and I don't want to see the wires, so Alt Shift Z. Okay. So I think that's pretty useful. Okay, Shift GT, remove the overlay, add a new material, go to material preview. If you don't have Cuber, you'd have to set a material for a single object. And this is our base object. Select everything. And with the object, we assign the material to. Selected, Shift GT. And this, I think that maintained our previous selection as the active object, so still have this. Go here and copy material to selected. Now they all have the same material, and then you can mess with the presets here. But if you have Cuber, Shift GT, new, and to assign the this, just use this. Okay. Now I'm going to add AO. Or multiply an AO to the vertex color. It just makes the separation between the objects more obvious. And then, following the video that I posted in Twitter and Instagram, we're going to use, so selecting everything, go to edit mode, and so tab A to select everything, U, Smart UV project, and since the model is angular, we'd have no problems with that. And use UV, open. So I'm using GS placement. You can find it in windmillart.net. So if you just search GS placement, it's right here, and you can download it. Be sure to read the README first. For this, the author of the program has something to say for the users of his amazing work. Okay, so let's use, I'm going to use this. So you're gonna be generating your own map, so I think our result will not be the same. Will probably be not the same, not be the same. So linear, going to use constant. And let's mess around with the size or the scale also. Let's try 0.5 or 2. Nope, that's too much. 1.5. Let's go back to 1. And you can also mess around with the location. Okay, let's just set this like this for now. And add the lights. So this is basically what I did with the video. But here we're going to randomize the lights based on these separated objects. So input, object info, attach this to the emission, and attach a color ramp. Set this to constant. And for our texture, we're going to use white noise. Set this to 1 dimension. Value or color, doesn't matter. Converter, and then we're going to use math node. This is going to be kind of like our random seed value. So if we modify this, you can see that it's changing position based on the different objects in the scene. So per object means this object here, this object here. Now we're going to add another layer here, or multiply another layer, and we're going to use J's placement texture as well. Multiply that. Color ramp. Set to constant as well, and this will be determining our color. I'm going to use another. Instead of this, I'm going to use this. And push it here. And let's make it smaller. How about 10 or 6? We can create another light color by creating another color step using the plus sign. Let's use blue. So this method is more appropriate for a single model. We're using multiple, so it's kind of hard to create. Or let's try and use this instead, the original one. So we're having a hard time because this is multiple objects. And this technique, this method I'm using is only designed for a single model presentation. I'm using Eve, but in cycles, you can replace this with geometry. And here you can see random per island. In cycles, that will work the same as this one here. But instead of randomizing to per object, it's going to randomize per object and per island. So this island here, this island here. But the only caveat is that you can't preview it in cycles. So this is another, you can use this instead, and it's quite powerful if you're using cycles. There we go. Let's give them all the light they need. And I'm going to, instead of, maybe we'll just mask the floor instead to make it less busy. Geometry, multiply, converter, separate XYZ, normal, and get the Z axis, multiply it here. And did it do what it's supposed to do? Let's use it here. In the factor, instead of a color input, there we go. So we're masking the color on this part and only assigning it to the sides of the building. So you can do a lot with procedural texturing. Wait a minute. I think I know a solution for this. Okay, let's start with this one. Okay, and with this one, these objects here, we're going to create a separate material. So if you don't have, if you have Cuber, select one of this and copy. That creates its own material. Select everything, material index, use the latest addition here. Now if I change this, it only changes for this particular building. There we go. And now we have 3. No, we only have 2. Okay. And do the same thing here. Select one object, copy, select everything. Use the latest selection in the latest addition in the material palette and modify the parameter. There we go. And then if you don't have Cuber, select this object here. How do you copy? Just this one. Oops. Yeah, this one. This icon here. And then Shift B. No. And then select the rest and copy material to selected. There we go. Now they have their own tiny lights. Now since this works per object, so, since this works per object, if we use apply mesh and join the objects, it's gone because this has become a single object. Now if you use this method, if you unify the mesh, randomize mesh into a single object, then instead of using this, we can use geometry, this one, and I'm going to turn on what? I thought it worked. You playing with me, Cycles? No. Okay. Uh, we're going to try and see if it works. Cycles. I'm sorry, laptop. Oh, solid. Just for a tiny bit. There we go. And let's reestablish symmetry. Auto mirror. X and Y. Okay. Uh, Render. There you go. Oh, this thing doesn't work with symmetry, but it's okay. At least it gets a more organic look to it. It's not symmetrized. Forget about that. So if you manage to, uh, there's a lot of ways you can approach this. If you unify the objects using apply mesh, then since this is UV, you can bake the lights into UV instead once you've settled to it. Once you've settled with the look, you can bake the lights into texture, into the texture map, or not. If you're using cycles all the time, you can use this method instead of the object info node. Let's increase the size, decrease the size, the lights. There we go. It has a more organic look to it. It's because of the asymmetric lighting setup. Okay, let's Control Alt P. Let's try and apply mesh, join objects to cube 1. Apply mesh, join objects to cube 2. So by the way, apply mesh will work even if these toggles aren't on. What it will do is apply the mirror, and if you've selected curve objects using the curve objects resulting from the add-on, it will turn them into meshes. So we're going to list this material 2, material 2. Now they're using the random per island method, and now we're using cycles. Now we can easily use them as or arrange them. I don't know what the asset, asset library. I forgot the name. You can now use it for your asset library. There are no single objects. Let's just create some pattern here. Just there you go. You have your 3 buildings you can use over and over again. In addition to your other libraries. Selecting this and adjusting our random seed to get a different look. Adjusting the size of the J's placement texture. Larger lights. Or smaller lights. Oh, that's too small. And increasing the intensity of the light 50. Nope, too much. 10. And that is it. That's how simple it is to create those tiny buildings. So in review, what we did, we used presets. We build the original building using by building our presets, then using that presets on these two objects here to make it faster, to iterate the design. Then we use JS placement to create some variation in the shapes. So this is this part here. So without and with, just keep it subtle. We just needed it to break the shapes of the objects and to make the relaxed areas busier instead of just adding more geometry. And then we used randomized lighting on this part here. And since we unified the object to make them more manageable, then we use, instead of using object info node, we use geometry. This from the input as well, geometry right here, and use random per island. And we found out that it doesn't work with a mirror, so that's nuts. But still okay because asymmetry is still up. Wait, it's symmetrical. And it's not symmetrical. Sometimes it's symmetrical, and sometimes it's, oh no, it's asymmetric. So that's it. This is a pretty simple object. I hope you can come up with the same type of pattern or design. So some people are saying that they can come up with the same design that I'm doing in my videos. Again, it all depends on the faces or the topology and the ratio of the faces used and the settings that I'm using. The ratio, the panel size, all depends on that. The symmetry, it also helps with that. Okay, so if it's if the result, if you can see the result from what I'm doing, then you can actually, then you can actually get it um, by yourself, in your side, from your side, with you doing it. Okay, so randomize. I should be doing this on my PC, not on the laptop. Okay, one last bit before we end this video. Let's try another. Let's try this one here for the lighting. Ooh, that's also okay. So if I increase this here to where it will affect more islands and it will affect less islands. How about this one? This is I'm going to use one, and so there's a lot of possibilities using this add-on with GH placement texture, with GNodes, with other add-ons that let you create base meshes, with other uh, add-ons that creates hard surface effects. So the possibilities are endless. Okay, so now all you have to do is create a setting for a perfect render. Create lighting and stuff and all that. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, um, use the comment section below or contact me in the links in the description. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching and take care.